isn't there quite a bit to be thankful for this year? I'm certainly thankful for not only, the food, the family, and all the other things, but this beautiful game that is college football, of course. Welcome to the Thanksgiving edition of the Any Given Saturday podcast. Anything can happen on any given Saturday, of course. Just ask those guys down at Auburn how they're feeling. We'll actually talk about Auburn in a little bit here, but we have an exciting Any Given Saturday podcast for you guys as we are going into the final week of the regular season. Yes, kids, we are down to that final week of the regular season already. I can't believe it myself, but we haven't had that really volcanic week where all these insane upsets happen that just come out of left field. Do we finally get that this week? We'll kind of dive into that and a little bit more. I also have the Any Given Saturday Top 25 coming up. I'm going to be dropping that here very shortly. That'll be one of the first things that we talk about, actually. Few other big surprises. In spite of the Auburn game, there's actually a couple more surprises that I also wanted to dive into. And of course, we have two major rivalry games happening over the course of this college football weekend. The Civil War game, or at least formerly known as the Civil War game between Oregon and Oregon State. And we have what many people in the Midwest just call the game. We're going to dive into the game here tonight as well. So hope you guys enjoy the Any Given Saturday podcast. If you do, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button. Hit subscribe if you have to be brand new to the channel. You have a real opportunity here to be an A1 since day one. You can be an OG supporter, and all you got to do, hit that little subscribe button down the lower right-hand corner. We're also going to talk about the preseason predictions that I've made and how accurate are those predictions. How off was I? Am I going to get roasted in the comments section? Probably will either way, but maybe we had some pretty on-point predictions as well. So we'll go into that and a lot more, but guys, I'm excited. We have quite a bit to talk about on this podcast here today. One podcast. We only planned for one podcast specifically because I wanted to talk about what we got going on here tonight. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic time, and I'm really excited for it. Another thing that I am really excited for as well is that Any Given Saturday Top 25. I'm so happy to bring this to you guys finally. It took a little bit of analysis, but we are here. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Any Given Saturday Top 25, this is not how I would rank these teams. I want to get that out of the way right now because we just have a really difficult time sometimes with reading comprehension or hearing comprehension. If this is not how I would rank this Top 25, if I was sitting on the College Football Playoff Committee today, that is not how I would go about ranking these teams at all. However, what this Top 25 does end up representing is if you'll have two teams on a neutral side field. If you get those two teams on a neutral side field, who would be favored over whom? That's what these power ratings that I like to call my Any Given Saturday, AGS Top 25 for short. That's what these power ratings represent. It's a power rating system, and it's just simply who would be favored over whom if they were playing on a neutral side field today, based on their total body of work over the course of the entire season. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. The newest alliteration of the Any Given Saturday Top 25 going into that final week of the regular season. We're going to work our way. We're starting from the bottom. We're going to work our way up like a Drake song. We're going to start with that 25 through 21. And we actually do have a couple of teams that are entering the top 25. Welcome back to UCLA, who we had earlier in the season, and then also North Carolina State, who we welcome back in for the first time in a minute. I'm not 100% sure if we've ranked North Carolina State at any point in the year. If it was, it would have been way back in September. But welcome back, North Carolina State. We'll talk about North Carolina State real quick, though. North Carolina State silently having an 8-3 win campaign. There's a real chance as well that they are going to have a 10-win season if you account for their bowl win or a potential bowl win as well. We're taking on North Carolina this upcoming week. That game is going to be at home in Raleigh, North Carolina. I think that's a game that North Carolina State could possibly win. I love the momentum that they're having at the moment. They're playing some really good ball, a program that honestly was forgotten about per se because they've had that sluggish start. They kind of struggled against teams like UConn, for example, in that first month of the season, but they silently kept working, even though they have been in that college football playoff conversation for a very long time this season. They silently kept working, and, silently and underrated wise, they could put together a really good season still on the verge of a 10-win year. They got to handle business against North Carolina, who has struggled in this last month and a half of the year, but they are still ranked in this top 25 as well. And then how about UCLA as well? Welcome back to the Bruins as well. Makes you beg the question, because there was some rumors that Chip Kelly might be fired at the end of the season because maybe they don't like how he handles NIL or recruiting. Makes you wonder if the wrong coach is on the hot seat in LA. UCLA manhandles USC. And listen, I thought the model believed that USC was going to win, but they didn't think they were going to cover. So it was like 5.5 in favor of USC. The model had USC -5. So expecting a competitive game, but in USC's direction, UCLA blows the doors off expectations, manhandles USC 38-20. And UCLA playing some solid ball, not a liquid or a gas either. So UCLA is back in at number 22, and then North Carolina State also back in at number 24 in the country. We'll keep it moving, though, as we try and gain our breath here real quick. We're going to jump from 16 to 20, that next part of the AGS top 25. One big muscle movement here is the Utah Utes. Is Utah a program that is starting to run out of gas? And listen, Utah is a veteran team, but it's becoming very apparent that Utah really needs Cam Rising. He's going to be back next season, but it doesn't help with the alliteration of Utah's team whatsoever. And that's unfortunate because Utah had the pieces to possibly make a run or at least make it to a major bowl game and what truly was an exciting Pac-12 conference title race to watch. Still are watching very closely. This Utah team is still good. Even though they have 4 losses, I would still have them rank ahead of a Tennessee or a Clemson in the top 25 rankings for the college football playoff, because look at the teams that Utah has lost to. They're all these, teams that are already being ranked. They lost to the likes of Oregon State, Oregon, Washington as well, right? So these are all really good teams, whereas Tennessee, who has the same record, they lost to Florida, and Florida might not be going bowling. They actually need to pull an upset off against Florida State or Missouri. One of those two squads. Actually, no, they didn't pull the upset off against Missouri. So Florida doesn't beat Florida State. They're not even going to go to a bowl game. And Tennessee lost to them actually convincingly, right? Clemson, I don't have as much of a problem being ranked in the top 25. I know that's a separate conversation, but I feel like Utah definitely got screwed over a little bit. If I would rank any 4-loss team at this point, it would be Utah over Clemson or Tennessee, but maybe that's that southeastern bias per se, right? But other than that, not a lot of major movement here. Got Louisville at 19, Iowa 18, and then you got a couple of SEC schools at 16 and 17. Then we jump into this top 15, looking at 11 through 15. Listen, we know that Oregon State and Washington just played a football game. Washington won that football game on the road. But for me, we saw a version of the game. If those two teams matched up against each other again today, I still would have Oregon State power rated as a favorite over Washington. And the reason why is when I look at that game, I can't help but think to myself, Oregon State dominated that second half. They were wearing down that front seven of Washington, and Washington is a little bit on that thinner end in terms of their front seven and that linebacker depth, which could come back to haunt them if they go against, say, an Oregon team who they might potentially go up against in the Pac-12 championship. Washington already secured their Pac-12 championship bid. Washington is very lucky that they were able to come away with a win there. If that game was to go even to overtime, I feel like Washington would have probably lost that game in overtime to Oregon State, but all credit in the world to the Washington Huskies. They found a way to win it out, and, they're still undefeated. Not a blemish yet on the year. Arizona, tough September, but boy, have they been playing some great football as of late. I told y'all when Arizona was starting to get into that top 25 of our AGS top 25, that they were going to pull off a bit upset or two. And boy, did they blow the doors off Utah. They really manhandled them. Arizona needs a little bit of luck to get into this Pac-12 championship. They need Oregon to lose to Oregon State tomorrow night. I'm recording this on Thanksgiving Day, because we got some time on the Thanksgiving morning. But Arizona playing some excellent football right now, and that's why we moved them up to number 12. The model really does like Arizona right now. We've only got Texas at 11. Finally, we go into this top 10, and for the entirety of the top 10, not really a lot of change here. Let me just address the elephant in the room, talking about this 6 through 10. Couple of things. Florida State. We know they lost Jordan Travis, and that's going to be a big loss. I don't know how big the loss is. So until further notice, I have Florida State still as the 10th best team in the country in my power rating system. We'll see what they look like with Rodemaker. Does have a full week of preparation against that Florida Gators team going on the road. But to be fair, that is Mike Norvell's first commit when he first got to Florida State, was Rodemaker. So a talented kid by every means of the imagination, and one of an old-fashioned kid that's been waiting his turn. And, now that Jordan Travis, he's not going to come back to Florida State. He's going to get his opportunity. If Florida State wins out, it doesn't matter what you think about this Florida State team. They're going to be in the college football playoff. Now, if they lose to Florida or they lose to Louisville in the ACC championship, it's a completely different discussion in terms of where Florida State belongs in that college football playoff committee rankings. But for now, I do have Florida State number 10. Speaking of number 7, Alabama, they moved down a couple of spots. That's not because of what Alabama did. They were more than fine against Chattanooga. I just don't really account for FCS games because what can you really find in a positive way? Like if you blow out an FCS team, it's like, congrats, you blew out an FCS team. But then if you lose to an FCS team, it's like, oh my God, what is going on with this team? Alabama handled their business, but we didn't really reward Alabama for beating up a team that's in a lower Division I level. So we don't have a less opinion. Their ranking is exactly the same as it was last week, but some other teams moved up. Which leads me to my top 5. This is what the top 5 is looking like right now. And one of those teams the other team that moved up besides Notre Dame, who was at 6, Georgia. Georgia's playing is kind of this team that's peaking at the right time right now. And I think that's really evident in how they really handled their business going in the Neyland Stadium and completely silencing that crowd. That's an impressive feat that was accomplished. Thought Georgia was going to win that game. Wasn't sure about them covering. Sure enough, Georgia does end up covering very comfortably, actually. So Georgia, we now have number 3 in the country in our power rating system. We're taking on Georgia Tech. And then you got Ohio State at number 2. We'll have a top 5 matchup in the AGS top 25 this week. And then Oregon's the number 1 team in the country. Oregon also, I believe, controls their own destiny if they beat Oregon State. And then they go on and beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship. Oregon's going to be in that college football playoff. I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't think anyone wants to play Oregon because you can say what you want about their resume. You truly can. However, here's the thing about the Oregon Ducks at the same time. Even though their resume may not be the best right now, they don't really have that signature win that you would think Oregon has. At the same time, the teams that they have on their schedule, which, by the way, they can't control what's on their schedule. That's something that's nothing that the coach does or that the players handle. That's up at the AD level, right? That's what's going on here with these schedules. They handle their business, and they've dominated the teams that have been placed on their schedule, and it showed. Oregon, really good team. They're our number 1 team in this AGS top 25. But like I always say, like whenever I reveal these power ratings, what do you guys think of the power ratings? You think I have a team too high, a team too low? What are your thoughts? Let me know down in that comment section. We could always have that spirited discussion. We're always there for that. Now, I did also talk about how we were going to have some surprises that I wanted to talk about over the course of this last weekend. So usually we have surprises and then we just the three games I really wanted to harp in on over the course of the past weekend, these three games that happened, man, like that was not just a surprise. That was more of an oh baby, what are you doing? Type of game from a few of these teams. So I'm not going to even worry about an intro to this clip. We'll sort that out whenever future Jake has to edit this one man team over here on the Any Given Saturday podcast. So let's go ahead and jump into what I just simply like to call, oh baby, what are you doing? And we're going to start with those Friday night lights, with that Pac-12 after dark. We got Colorado. They were on the road taking on Washington State. And Colorado was a team going in that was actually close. That was actually kind of close, right? So Colorado is on a 5-game losing streak. They have been down horrendous since they lost to Stanford. But in the games that they've played in, they've been right there. They have been right there. They were close to being Oregon State. They were close to being Arizona. They were competitive against UCLA as well. They were right there. And they were going in. They were taking on a Washington State team who was on a 6-game losing streak. They just lost to Cal. They just lost to Stanford. They also lost to Arizona State. Games that Washington State was all favored to win in, by the way. So you have two teams that were battling to keep their bowl hopes alive. Whoever lost this game was not going to have any opportunity to experience a bowl game. One team had to come out on top, and the model actually did have Colorado winning this game. It had Colorado minus 0.5, whereas Washington State was like a 4.5-point favorite when the game started. Washington State did not care about that model at all. Cameron Ford, he goes off 288 yards, 4 touchdowns in this game. We saw the old Cam Ward. At the same time, Colorado did have some pretty bad injury luck. Shedeur Sanders had to leave the game in the second quarter after he took a massive shot. So was in that concussion protocol, to say the least. We'll see if he actually does end up playing or not. But not really a lot of bright spots, not really a lot of positives here for Colorado. Got blown out when really are not supposed to. And, you thought this team was going in the right direction. And listen, going into this season, if Colorado was going to win like 4 or 5 games, you're going to be happy with that. But at the same time, though, because of the optics of it, because of this losing streak, the season's going to be viewed just a little bit more differently than how the season actually gone, right? But even with the way that Colorado is going to end this season, and listen, it's very likely that Colorado is going to lose their final game of the season, losing to Utah. This is still a positive step in the right direction. You have to remember what Colorado football was at last year. This was not only a team that was the worst team in the Power 5, and it wasn't even close. This was arguably one of the worst teams in college football, period, last season. This team was bad. And it's clear that there's still some holes on this roster, right? Colorado, this is a Colorado team that had one of the worst lines in college football. And that was an issue that I kind of highlighted when talking to folks about Colorado. They may have the fancy gadget players, Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Those are both very talented players, for example, but there was not really a game this year, except maybe Colorado State, where the Buffaloes had an advantage in the trenches on either side of the ball. And that was evident. The Buffaloes allowed an FBS worst 54 sacks in this point of the season. We still have another game to go. And Washington State took advantage of that weakness, and that's why we have a score like we did. Washington State took advantage of the fact that Shedeur Sanders had to run for his life, while Cameron Ward was chilling, man. He was vibing. He was having a good time, and that's why I was able to have the great game that he had. And it also allows Washington State to snap their longest losing streak that they've had since 2013. Talked about how Washington State was coming in on a 6-game losing streak. And it was also a game where they were averaging just 20 points a game the last 6 weeks too. So nothing was really working for Washington State. For the Cougars, it was a get right game, it seemed like. And you love to see that. Washington State now has a chance to be bowl eligible, but they're going to have to find a way to take down Washington in the Apple Cup, which, we've seen crazy things happen, but, we'll see if Washington State can take that momentum and give Washington at least a scare in the Apple Cup. I'm still high on Colorado going forward. I still think that they did a good job hiring Coach Prime. It's just going to need some time. Most teams do not get turned around overnight, and that's evident. Coach Prime still improved his team from last year, and 4 to 5 wins is what I expected Colorado to win here in year number 1 in a very competitive Pac-12 conference. The depth in the Pac-12 is deeper than what we see in the SEC this year. It's just that kind of season. It's a shame that the Pac-12 is going to fall apart, unfortunately. You hate to see it, but that being said, I think Coach Prime's going to have his guys going in the right direction. We'll have to keep an eye on Coach Prime and his guys moving forward, but hats off to Washington State. They are still alive to go to a bowl game if they can pull a big upset off against Washington in the Apple Cup. In another edition of the Oh Baby, What Are We Doing? We got this game that happened in the Sun Belt, actually. Texas State and Arkansas State. Now, we talked about Texas State not too long ago, talking about how, happy that we were for Texas State. They just got bowl eligibility for the very first time. They got a good chunk of transfers in the transfer portal, like most notably TJ Finley. What do you think when you hear about Arkansas State? You're probably thinking about the Arkansas State team that went up against Oklahoma. Butch Jones was either crying or fake crying on the sideline. It was an ugly first couple weeks of the season for Arkansas State, right? Arkansas State in those first couple of weeks was outscored 110-3. It was ugly for Arkansas State. There were legitimate questions of whether Butch Jones was going to survive at the end of the season. And not only is he going to survive, he actually did a good job turning things around, especially when they got in the Sun Belt Conference action. And Sun Belt is a solid league in the group of 5. I think top to bottom, this might be the best league in the group of 5. I think it's here in this Sun Belt. A lot of good football being played in the Sun Belt Conference, in my opinion. Now, Texas State, they did mess around, and oh baby, did they absolutely find out. Arkansas State not only won this game, which is a little bit of a, well, I don't know if I want to say surprise. It was not expected by the model, okay? The model expected this to be a competitive game. They expected Arkansas State to cover. The model did not believe Arkansas State would win this game, even though this game was at home. But that being said, though, Arkansas State took Texas State to the ringer. I mean, I don't know what to say after a score like that. After giving up 70+ points early in the season, you put up a 77 burger yourself. Like, you absolutely love to see that. Jaquez Cross, for example, big day for him. He rushed for 139 yards, had 3 touchdowns on the ground. He also had a 93-yard kickoff return, too. That alone nearly outscores the entire Texas State team. And Texas State, it's not like they had a bad offensive day. They really didn't. It wasn't like, okay, like the team got shut out in the first half, and then all their points were in garbage time when the game was over. Nah, Texas State was scoring the entire time too. It's just that Arkansas State was ridiculous. Like of the 31 points that Texas State scored, 17 of them were in the first half. What do you do? It's bad day, historically bad day for the Texas State defense. I'll tell you what, man. What else do we have here? You want to talk about how bad it was for like the Texas State defense? They didn't even, give up that many yards on the ground. Like, so I'm looking at it as I figured it was okay. Arkansas State had a ton of yards. No, Texas State outgained Arkansas State 539 to 487. Big difference. Turnovers, big factor in this one. Really big factor. Texas State turned the ball over 4 times in this game. 2 of them were fumbles lost. 2 of them were interceptions as well. So 4 total turnovers for the Arkansas State defense. That's big. You'll love to see that. 1 of them, actually, no, 3 of them ended up being returned for a touchdown. So right there, you got 21 points there. And then you also have the kick return for a touchdown at the end of the third quarter as well. So a lot of defensive plays, a lot of special teams happening here. Because Arkansas State didn't even win turnover, or not turnover. They didn't win time of possession. Texas State dominated time of possession. They had the ball for nearly 34 minutes. Arkansas State with just 26. It's crazy out here, man. It is absolutely crazy. But shout out to Arkansas State. This is a team that I thought was dead in the water after that 70-something to nothing loss, and then losing to Memphis 37-3. This is a team that has its act together. And now Arkansas State is bowl eligible. Who would have thought? Who would have thought the Arkansas State Red Wolves would be bowling after what they went through the first couple of weeks of the season? Wasn't me. Certainly wasn't me. And for Texas State, listen, this loss sucks. You got embarrassed. You got bamboozled. You're still bowl eligible, though. This is the first time you've been bowl eligible. So, listen, really look for the Texas State Bobcats. But it doesn't change the fact that Texas State, they're having their best season in school history since they moved up to the FBS to play this higher end of Division I football. But man, did that throw me in for a whirlwind. I'll tell you what. And then let's keep it in the Southeast for a second. Auburn. What are you doing, baby? What are you doing? Oh, baby, what is you doing? Auburn lost. They didn't just lose. Let me put in context how bad this loss is. And this loss was terrible for 2 separate reasons, okay? First of all, you paid this school nearly $2 million for a bye win late in the season. And listen, every conference, multiple teams in multiple conferences play cupcakes at the beginning of the year to help inflate that record. Okay? It's part of the sport. But the SEC is maybe the only ones that are scheduling this late in the season. These teams that are playing FCS teams, it's not just the SEC that's doing this late in the year. Florida State also did against North Alabama. That's a conversation for another time. So Auburn paid this particular school close to $2 million for a bye win. Okay? Not only did Auburn find a way to lose this game, that's not even the most embarrassing part for itself. It's not. It's not even the most embarrassing part for itself. The most embarrassing part, and I read this stat off of ESPN, is this is the worst loss by an SEC team against a non-conference opponent when favored by 10 points or more in the last 43 seasons. Worst loss. Auburn, when this line closed, Auburn was a 25.5 point favorite. And it was a 20-something point win. It was that. But it wasn't Auburn. It was New Mexico State. New Mexico State won this game. And it might be the biggest upset in college football, the way that this year has been. And it's not just that New Mexico State won this game. They controlled this game the entire time. They outgained Auburn 414 to 213. They didn't just win. They dominated the Auburn Tigers. And a shout out to Jerry Kill That dude has found a way to win at New Mexico State. That is one of the hardest jobs in Division I football to find a win. Now, you see their record, you might notice New Mexico State's record is at 9-3. They still have one more game left. At least two more. They have the Conference USA Championship too. You think this builds confidence for that New Mexico State team? I sure think it does. By the way, this is the same team that lost to UMass. Who would have thought? Now, going back over to Auburn for a second, even though this is an embarrassing loss, for Hugh Freeze, this is a moderate success. You at least have Auburn still tracking generally in the right direction. But what's the most clear about this game in particular is that Auburn is still at a point where they can't just roll their helmets out there against anybody that has a pulse and expect to win the game. Auburn is not at that point yet. But Hugh Freeze has his team in a better spot than what they had at this time last year. They're still going to a bowl game. And that bowl game is going to be important because that's extra practices that you could use to develop your guys towards the end of the season. So it's still really important on that front. It's not going to get better for Auburn, though, at least this year, at least in the regular season. Auburn's still going to be at home. Now we got the Iron Bowl coming up. And Alabama's playing their best ball that they've been playing all year long. They're starting to roll. So we'll see if Auburn has a pulse against Alabama. They should because it's a rivalry game. But, man, does Jordan Hare Stadium need to show up and really get behind these guys if they're going to have it a prayer in that Iron Bowl? That was embarrassing. That was beyond embarrassing. If I was an Auburn fan, I would be disgusted. Not to a point to where I want to fire Hugh Freeze. This is bad. This is a really bad look, not just for Auburn, but for the rest of the conference. And again, hats off to New Mexico State. Those guys deserved it. They were not scared on the name of the front of the jersey. And I think that really matters. New Mexico State on the verge of a 10-win season. They're going to be competing for a conference championship, first year in Conference USA. And I think that's a big deal. And I think Jerry Kill is also going to be a guy that is going to be on some watch lists in terms of going to a higher job. Like, what does happen to UCLA? Do they actually pull the trigger on Chip Kelly? Would Jerry Kill be a top target for UCLA? Who knows? But I'm sure he's not thinking about that right now. I'm sure he's excited that he's got his guys ready to play. And now they're just trying to build a little bit more momentum before they get into that Conference USA championship. So that kind of concludes the, oh, baby, what is you doing portion of the show here tonight. Man, that's crazy. It's so absolutely crazy that happened still. I still can't believe it personally. Need a drink real quick. So I want to kind of do something that I haven't done yet, really. I kind of want to look back. When the season was just starting, and specifically when we were just starting this podcast, one of the first things that I did was I gave my predictions in terms of who I think is going to win each individual conference at the FBS level. And then I also gave my prediction to who I think was going to win a national championship and who I thought was going to go out and be a part of this college football playoff at the end of the year. So I definitely want to go ahead and do that now. And we're going to start with the conferences. Now, I put together a bet slip of like picking every conference champion. It was like one of those, I had like 37 cents left over from like another bet, and we tossed it on this, kind of like a scratch off lottery ticket. So I want to go around and take a look at each individual conference and how do I feel about my prediction still. So we're going to go in alphabetical order. We're going to start with the American Conference here. I had UTSA winning the American Conference as kind of that sleeper dark horse pick. Now, it looks shaky for UTSA. I'm not going to lie to you. I saw them lose to Army in September and made me doubt everything. But, after that loss to Tennessee for UTSA, they've been on a 7-game winning streak. They are tied. They're in a 3-way tie right now with Tulane and SMU. And Tulane, they actually play that Tulane team on the road this upcoming weekend. They're playing this on a Friday afternoon, 3:30 kickoff on ABC. It's a de facto semifinal game. Whoever loses this game will likely be left out of the American Conference Championship picture. SMU is playing Navy. I expect Navy to win that game outright, to say the least. So let's say, for intents purposes, SMU wins that game. That's one team that's going to be in. So you're looking at, you have to be undefeated in conference play in order to go out and play, go to this American Conference Championship. Now, who knows what happens to how they decide who ends up hosting the conference championship. The American is one of those conferences where the best conference record does get to host at their home stadium. I remember this when Cincinnati was in the American. They hosted Houston in 2021. I was actually there at that game. But UTSA is looking real good. They have Frank Harris back, and they're still in this picture. It's going to be a winner-take-all against Tulane, like I said. And for the record, Tulane may be favored, but the model not only thinks UTSA will cover, but they think that they're going to outright win on the road against Tulane. We're calling it now. We're calling UTSA beating Tulane tomorrow or today, depending on when you see this podcast. So that's one. So for the American Conference, we're feeling pretty good about the American. Next, we have the ACC. The ACC, we picked Florida State to win the ACC championship. And Florida State, unlike UTSA, who we talked about earlier, Florida State has already worked their way into the ACC championship. They're going to be competing for that. Neutral site game. They'll be taking on Louisville as well. So the ACC championship is already matched up. Last week, I was more confident in Florida State than I am right now. And it's because of what I said earlier. Jordan Travis had an extremely unfortunate injury. It's a very nasty injury. And we hope for the best in terms of hoping that Jordan Travis, gets better soon. But we're not going to see Jordan Travis in that Florida State uniform again. And the question is, how does Rodemaker handle that? I think there's enough talent on Florida State that they can still beat Florida, that they could still beat Louisville. But the margin of error is a bit smaller now. So I'm really curious with how Florida State handles it. But for now, we're feeling okay about Florida State. But it could look a little dicier here in the last couple of weeks because of that injury taking place. A very unfortunate injury. Not from a dirty play. I want to point that out as well. Next up, we got the Big 12. Big 12, we picked Texas to win the Big 12 championship. Texas, a team that beat Alabama. So we sort of didn't see that one coming. But at the same time, Texas, if they win, it's very simple. Texas wins. Texas is going to be in the Big 12 championship. Plain and simple. They just got to go beat Texas Tech. However, things could get pretty dicey here in terms of who Texas plays in the Big 12 championship. It could be literally 6 different teams. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Kansas State. We'll see who sorts themselves out. Right now, Oklahoma State says that they have the tiebreaker, but a lot of sort out there. West Virginia, Iowa State, and Texas Tech are technically not out either. They're long shots, and they'll need a lot of help. But let's be real. But those teams all have the possibility of going to the Big 12 championship as well. So quite a bit to sort out here in this final weekend. That's going to be fun to watch. But we feel that whomever Texas plays, regardless, Texas would be a favorite in the Big 12 championship. So we feel good about that. So right now we're projected to possibly go free for free. We're not too bad. After that, we have the Big 10. We picked Michigan to win the Big 10 this year. I know as an Ohio guy, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Michigan, it just really depends on one game and one game only, the game. And we'll talk about the game later, so I'm not going to dive into it, but Michigan wins. They're going to be favored in that Big 10 championship against Iowa. If they lose on Saturday, then no Big 10 championship and likely a college football playoff appearance for Michigan. So everything's on the line there. Something to keep an eye on. Conference USA, we picked Western Kentucky to win the Conference USA, and we were wrong. We were wrong about Western Kentucky. Now, Western Kentucky was a team that, had like their quarterback coming back, and beginning of the year, we were feeling reasonably good about Western Kentucky. They beat like Mid-Tennessee State, Louisiana Tech, like, all right, things are going good there. Even when they lost to Jacksonville State, we weren't worried because Jacksonville State and Sam Houston, neither of those teams were eligible for the Conference USA Championship. So that's why I said earlier when we were talking about New Mexico State against Auburn, the New Mexico State, Jacksonville State has no water in terms of who goes to the Conference USA Championship because Jacksonville State is not eligible due to the NCAA probation that's put on new FBS teams. Jacksonville State is in year 2 of that. So that being said, they did lose to Liberty, but then they lose to New Mexico State. And that right there, my friends, seals Western Kentucky's fate. Because of that, Western Kentucky is not competing for a Conference USA championship. We'll still likely see them in bowl season because they do have 6 wins already, but we were wrong about that. So that's the first one that we got wrong. Now we go to the MAC. The MAC, we picked Toledo to win, and the MAC championship, I think, is going to be really interesting. We already know what the MAC championship is going to be. It's going to be the Red Hawks of Miami going up against Toledo. Toledo already has won the West. Miami, on the other hand, has gone and beat the East. Here's the thing about Toledo, though. Toledo has already played Miami and beat Miami. The reason why I say that is not because of what you think. It's just hard to beat a team twice. That MAC championship, which I believe that's also a neutral sider. I think that's at Ford Field still, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's going to be real intriguing. I'm looking forward to that MAC championship. MAC has always been something that I'm pretty excited to watch over, but something to keep an eye on as well. Toledo has a chance to win the MAC. Up next, we have the Mountain West Conference here, and in the Mountain West, we picked Boise State to win in the Mountain West, and Boise State, we picked Boise State to win this conference. Looked really, really dicey in October, but Boise State is, for all intents and purposes, they worked their way into this conversation right now that they're currently in. So here's what's looking like right now. So UNLV is on top. They're at 6-1. And then there's a freeway tie after that. Air Force, Boise State, and then also San Jose State. Boise State already has the win over San Jose State. So winning this game would mean that, okay, it's a semifinal game for the Mountain West. Air Force and Boise State, and Boise State is at home. So that helps. Air Force is also on a 3-game losing streak. If Boise State wins, they'll be in the Mountain West Championship. They probably will not get to host, but for all intents and purposes, they'll be in the Mountain West Championship. So Boise State is at least still alive, but they, I wouldn't have them favored. I don't know if I would have them favored over a UNLV. I think UNLV, they might be the favorite in that hypothetical. I haven't checked the model since I started recording the pod, so I can't say that for certain. But Boise State is still alive. Pac-12, we picked Washington to win the Pac-12. I feel really good about this pick still. They're going to at least be in the Pac-12 championship. I am concerned about them going possibly against Oregon. If Oregon's in the Pac-12 championship, I do know that Oregon would be favored over Washington. And I don't know if Washington could beat Oregon a second time. I don't know. I feel a little dicey about that one, to be honest with you. But Washington also has a shot. So we're feeling good about Washington there. They already got their spot locked in for the Pac-12 championship. LSU. LSU and the SEC. We were wrong about LSU, though. So a big reason why we rocked with LSU is we just find in general the team would take that step forward. And Jayden Daniels is a quarterback that will at least be invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. But at the same time, the rest of the team around him, particularly on defense, let him down quite a bit. It's unfortunate. It's certainly unfortunate. Feels like that they kind of wasted Jayden Daniels' talent, because not only did he throw for 3,500 yards this year, he also has 1,000 rushing yards as well. So things that need to be changed on the defensive side. But LSU, and what really locked them in was that loss to Alabama. If they were able to pull that win off against Alabama, they would be in the driver's seat right now to win the West and take on Georgia in the SEC championship. But unfortunately, losing Jayden Daniels in that second half kind of sealed their fate there. Alabama goes on, wins 42-28, and that was all she wrote after that. So we were wrong about LSU. And then finally in the Sun Belt, we picked South Alabama to win, and South Alabama broke our hearts. They really disappointed me, to be honest with you. So we lost to James Madison, which I'm not surprised about. James Madison is a really special football team. And I talked about this specifically in the Sun Belt prediction video. If James Madison was actually allowed to compete for the Sun Belt championship, if they were not in the NCAA probationary period, I would have picked James Madison to win that conference championship. And James Madison would theoretically control their own destiny. But South Alabama not only lost to James Madison, they lost to Troy, and that was the game that they needed to have in order to keep their Sun Belt hopes alive. But then to add insult to injury, they also lose to the Raging Cajuns too, and it's tough. You hate to see it. Absolutely tough. So South Alabama, they could still finish the season strong. They could finish the regular season on a 3-game winning streak. It wouldn't matter. Troy is already locked up the Sun Belt West. Just who you're looking at. Is it going to be Coastal Carolina? Is it going to be App State? Is it going to be Old Dominion? Is it going to be one of those free schools coming out of the East? It's going to be interesting what that Sun Belt Championship's looking like. But South Alabama is not going to be there. So we were wrong. So to cap things off, here's what we have. So American is a maybe. ACC, we have Florida State, we got Texas locked in, UTSA, Michigan. They got to play their way in. Conference USA, SEC, and the Sun Belt, we were all wrong in. Mountain West is also, they got to play their way in. And then Pac-12 and Mid-American, at least get to the conference championship game. They're locked in. So we're looking at possibly a 7 for 10, which is pretty good. Maybe let's shoot either like 4 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. Really wouldn't be too bad. Now for college football playoff, on the other hand, we also talked about who I think would win in the college football playoff, or not who I think would win college football playoff necessarily. Well, I did talk about who I thought would win national championship. But let's go ahead and dump into who I had as my 4 teams in the college football playoff. So the 4 teams that I had Georgia, I had Michigan, I had Washington, and then I also had Florida State. Those were my 4 college football playoff teams at the beginning of the year. And you know the craziest thing about those 4 teams? They're all still undefeated, and therefore they all control their own destiny. And Georgia, so we'll start with Georgia. Georgia wins against Georgia Tech. They're going to be 12-0. They'll be in the SEC championship. If they were to lose against Alabama, and that's an if, theoretically Georgia could still get in. but they would need some help for sure. They would need a little bit of help. They would need teams like they would need Texas to drop a game and maybe like everything else like remain like chalk, or maybe even like a Michigan or Ohio State. They lose to Iowa. So it'd be like one of those two things. And maybe we would see Georgia still in the college football playoff under those circumstances. In that case, we would have two teams from the SEC in. What else? Michigan. Everything rides on that Ohio State game. They gotta beat Ohio State, and then they're gonna take on a ranked Iowa, likely a ranked Iowa team. So this is a tough part of the schedule. We all knew this moving forward, but can Michigan prove that they can beat Ohio State without those cheating allegations? Without Jim Harbaugh? It's tough. We'll see. Model does have to be a very close game. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Washington. Washington is going to play Washington State in the Apple Cup. They should win that game. They got to beat Oregon twice, though. If they don't beat Oregon, but they do go 12-0, they're kind of going to need some chaos around them in order to still be in. For example, we need, maybe Washington probably might not be in if they don't win the Pac-12 championship. I mean, I'm thinking about this in my head right now. And so they would need Georgia to lose. No, Georgia would need to win. Michigan would need to lose. And then Texas would also need to lose as well. So if those three things don't happen, that's a problem. That would be a problem. And even then, I don't know if that would be enough. I really don't know. So maybe everything hinges on that Pac-12 championship, because Oregon would get in for sure too. But would definitely need a lot of help regardless. Florida State handles their business against Florida and Louisville. I think they would be in regardless. However, if they lose to either team, I feel like they would leave Florida State out, even if they were a one-loss conference champion, partially because of that injury to Jordan Travis. And I don't think it's fair that the committee would put a value on players being having a rank like a major impact on a team's college football playoff ranking. Should be based off the resume and the entire body of work. But unfortunately, that's just how humans think. That's just that human bias. I think Florida State would be left out if they lose a game. But overall, the playoff field that I chose all control their own destiny. So, I mean, with 2 weeks left to go, we're feeling good about that. And then we paid Michigan to win a national championship. Michigan, we have ranked in the top 5, but they're not peaking at the right time. So I'm concerned. I'm concerned for sure, especially going up against Ohio State, who is kind of peaking at that right time. So that was our preseason predictions. Felt like we're doing pretty good so far. Hopefully, I didn't just jinx myself. If I do, go ahead and jump into that comment section and roast me, because I would deserve it. I'm going to take a quick drink here real fast. We are thirsty. We are absolutely thirsty right now. Oh, mouth's starting to get dry. We're going to power through. We are strong. We are strong over here in the Any Given Saturday podcast. We just got a couple more games I want to talk about. I want to talk specifically what's used to be known as the Civil War. I don't know if they changed the name to something else, but I'm still going to call it the Civil War for intents purposes. And then we have the game. First, we'll start with a game that's happening a little bit sooner. Oregon State is going to be taking on Oregon. Now, Oregon State, what we got going on for Oregon State? Oregon State, this is a Pac-12 championship bid on the line. That's what not necessarily, not for Oregon State though. Oregon State is out of that title picture. Because of that, gruesome loss to the Washington Huskies. That's just the unfortunate part. And they also lost to Washington State and Arizona earlier too. Oregon, however, they're still in the hunt for the Pac-12 championship. They're still also, for all intents and purposes, control their own destiny to get into the college football playoff as well. this is also the last time that we might see these two teams play up against each other in the near future. As you may know, Oregon is going to leave for the Big Ten. And as of right now, this is a game that they have not yet struck a deal between these two teams. They are working on it. They're trying to keep this rivalry alive, but Oregon's going to the Big Ten after this year. So the future of this rivalry game is in serious doubt. And it's a little bittersweet because the Pac-12, and I'm not even from the West Coast. I'm an East Coast guy, Midwesterner at heart. It's been really fun to watch the Pac-12 this year. It's been, in my opinion, the most exciting conference to watch all season long. But unfortunately, all good things come to an end. However, for now, let's go jump into the game on the field. This is going to be a Friday night kickoff game happening the day after Thanksgiving. It's going to be kicking off at 8:30 Eastern. That's when Oregon State and Oregon are going to go up against each other. We've already seen Washington control their way into the Pac-12 championship. So this second one is on the line right here, right now. Even though Oregon State cannot go to the Pac-12 championship, they can create some chaos. What an Oregon State win would mean is that Oregon would need Arizona to lose in the Territorial Cup against Arizona State. And then also, in addition, they'll need a little bit up. Oregon would definitely be out of that Big 12 championship. Or not the Big 12. Oh my goodness. I'm starting to fall apart here, boys. They would be out of the college football playoff as well. And it would not be a more sweeter story. Maybe a little bit of karma thrown in there as well. Imagine if Oregon State pulls this upset off, keeps Oregon out of the college football playoff, and just takes out the pain that they're feeling. A program that feels like they're being left behind in modern college football because of the realignment. Now, looking at the game itself, what are the big keys of this particular game? I mean, it has to start with what we got going on. Bo Nix. We got to talk Bo Nix. He's up there with that Jaden Daniels, with Michael Penix Jr. in terms of that Heisman voting. He's one of the best players, or at least the best quarterbacks in the country. And he's been electric this year. 35 passing touchdowns so far this year. Also has a couple of rushing, or only has thrown 2 interceptions all season long. He has accounted for a total of 40 touchdowns. He has been a problem. So for Oregon State to win this game, how do they pull this off? I think it starts with, one, that front seven has to get home to Bo Nix. And they're going to have to employ a similar strategy in what they employed against Washington in their home matchup last weekend. Limit the time possession that Oregon has and just being more physical. Oregon State was more physical in their game last week against Washington. It didn't turn into a win, but 9 times out of 10, when you're a more physical team, you'll end up winning. Turnovers really killed them. And that leads to another point as well. You have to cut down on the costly mistakes. Oregon is certainly not a team where you could lose the turnover battle and still beat this team. Oregon is not going to beat Oregon. You have to go out and beat Oregon. So they got to do a better job with the miscues, because the miscues were the tilting issue, the botch punt, the turnovers in their own territory, like things like that. And also, if Bo Nix is allowed to cook, it's going to be barbecue chicken before it even starts. But speaking to that physicality, Oregon can be physical as well. They can be a more physical team. Is it Dame time? And I'm not talking about Damian Lillard. I'm talking about Damian Martinez, who has kept piling up the yards. He's really having a repeat of his true freshman camp. Actually, he is built off his true freshman campaign, a year in which he was able to go out and win the Pac-12 Freshman of the Year. Remember that? Most of you probably don't know that because you're probably not from the West Coast. Pepper Ridge Farm remembers. But Martinez has built upon his freshman year. He's currently second in the Pac-12 right now with an average of over 100 yards a game. He's had 6 games with 100-plus yards rushing. That includes his last 3. He is a Doak Walker finalist. He's the only Pac-12 player, in fact, I can say that, and that Doak Walker Award is for the nation's top running back. Damian Martinez needs to have a big game. If you get into, so to recap, you get into a shootout with Oregon, it's not looking good. If you turn the ball over more times than Oregon, it's not looking good for you. If you can't get it going on the ground, if Damian Martinez is bottled up, then we're going to have a problem here as well. Last 3 games in which he gone over 100 yards, they've been 2-1. That only loss being that surprise against Washington. So take a quick look at what we have in terms of the model. And right now, the model, so Vegas right now, according to ESPN Bet, has it like around 2 touchdowns, give or take, right? The model agrees. The model is leaning towards Oregon to win and Oregon to also cover. Now, Oregon has been a team that prides itself off of its physical toughness. Dan Lanning is trying to build a team that's kind of in that same kind of format as like an SEC defense. I think Oregon State is ultimately going to be overwhelmed. I want Oregon State to win. I want this for the Oregon State Beavers because they were screwed over so mightily in the most recent round of college football realignment. I want this so bad for the Beavers. So my heart says Oregon State wins outright. But what my brain says, and this is with them going to Autzen Stadium in Eugene. Been there over the summer. That's a really nice football stadium, by the way. I think Oregon wins, and I also think that Oregon is going to cover. I am going to agree with the model on that particular aspect. But we wish nothing but the best for Oregon State. We're going to root for them. We're not going to even hide that bias there. But if I wanted to bet on this game, personally, I would pick Oregon to cover. But hey, maybe we could do like a self-jinx there, and we can cheer on an Oregon State upset as well. Which leads to the big game that's also happening on Fox. Fox getting the best games this week, man. At least in my opinion. It's just called The Game. It's just simply called The Game. Ohio State, Michigan. 2 teams that are in the top 5. 2 teams that are tied on top of the Big Ten East. There is no game this week during this rivalry week. And rivalries in college football are part of the reason why the sport is so special. But this rivalry week in general does not carry more significance, both at a regional level and on a national level, more than Ohio State and Michigan. This is the last iteration where the rivalry game will still matter to these 2 teams. But after this year, it is truly possible with the expanded college football playoff coming up and also with the removal of divisions in the Big Ten, which I agree that divisions should have been removed in the first place. I think that's a really good move by conferences. However, instead of most of the time these 2 teams playing each other once, we're looking at these 2 teams playing against each other 2, maybe even 3 times, depending on how the college football playoff picture shakes out in the future. But for now, everything is on the line in this game. Right now, this is what's at stake exactly. Big Ten East Division. Winner of this game goes to Indianapolis. They'll take on Iowa. And regardless of who wins this game, by the way, whoever wins this game will be a favorite, by the way, by quite a bit, actually, to beat Iowa in that Big Ten championship game out in Indianapolis. A win would also secure most likely a college football playoff spot. That's also in the works as well. More importantly, Michigan needs this win more than Ohio State does, because Ohio State at least has a stronger strength of schedule. However, if Michigan lose this game, let's say Michigan will need a lot more help than Ohio State would if they were in the same exact position. So if there's one spot for the Big Ten, it's going to go to the winner of this game. Just letting that known right about now. This game could go in either direction. You see what the current line is. You see what the current any given Saturday power rating model does. Right now has Michigan minus 3.5. And the model has Michigan minus 3. Now, I want to make that clear. The reason why Michigan is favored is because it is in Ann Arbor. If it was in a neutral site or at Ohio State would be favored. I think it's that close between these two teams. These are two very good teams. Two teams that I specifically had ranked in the top 5. So we'll break it down in terms of how Ohio State wins this game, and then how Michigan finds the way to win this game. We'll start with the underdogs. We're going to start with Ohio State. What does Ohio State need to do? Ohio State, first and foremost, they got to get that running game going early, and they got to get it going fast. Trayvon Henderson is going to play a massive role in this particular game. Trayvon Henderson, you're going to see his stats, or you might see his stats up like on the ESPN app. He has about 800 yards, 10 touchdowns. It's not the most eye-popping stats, but you got to remember, this guy's been hurt, but now he's healthy, and he's running hard, and I mean extremely hard right now. 4 of the last 5 games that he's played in, and specifically the 4 games that he's came back and played in, 3 of them, he's ran for over 100 yards. And the only reason why he did in that Michigan State game is because they were blowing the doors off Michigan State, and he didn't play nearly as much in the second half, or carry the ball nearly as much in that second half as well. He's a home run hitter. And Trayvon Henderson getting those runs early is going to help take some pressure off Kyle McCord, or what some of the Ohio State fans like to call him, Honda McCord. Right? Speaking of Kyle McCord's going to have to make some plays, because this Michigan defense is fast, and this Michigan defense plays extremely hard. It's one of the best defenses in the entire country. He's going to have to make some plays. He's going to have to grow up. And Kyle McCord, to his credit, even though he hasn't looked necessarily, he doesn't have the same like eye-popping plays necessarily like we saw like a Justin Fields or a CJ Stroud, for example, as well. But he's taking care of the ball. He's only thrown 4 interceptions. He does not very often put it in harm's way. He may not be as amazing as the first 2 quarterbacks, but he does keep the ball out of harm's way, and that's going to be important. It's going to come down to who wins the turnover battle as well, and I think having a quarterback like Kyle McCord, where, hey, he might not make those eye-popping plays, but he takes care of the ball, I think that's extremely important for Ohio State. And then also, the defense needs to apply the hard lessons that they've learned from last year. They cannot let this tandem, that Michigan has in its backfield from being able to run all over them. Because that was how Michigan pulled away in that second half. Run after run after run, and eventually it wore down that front seven, and they were able to hit home runs late in the game that put Ohio State away painfully. So it's going to come down to who can be more physical at the line of scrimmage at the end of the day. Likewise, for Michigan to win, two things that we haven't already spoken about. Can this defense likewise hold Trayvon Henderson down? And not only that, can they contain Marvin Harrison? You are not shutting down Marvin Harrison Jr. That, in my opinion, from a talent standpoint, is the best wide receiver in college football. That man is special. He is going to possibly be a perennial Pro Bowl player at the NFL. He's going to be a top 10 pick when he declares, because you already know he's going to declare. He's got that NFL blood in him. He's got that dog in him. How does Marvin Harrison Jr. get contained here? As well as just the receiving group in general. Because prior to last week, Michigan hasn't even seen a receiver group as talented as Maryland's. And they had some struggles. There was some issues with Maryland's passing attack and Ohio State's wideouts. And don't forget CJ Strover too. Strover, he's like a Farmer Gronk type of guy, man. That Ohio State wideout room is going to be an even bigger problem because it's even more talented than that Maryland receiving group. Okay. And then for other intensive purposes, how does JJ McCarthy, how does he handle the pressure of this big time game without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline? I have a couple of friends that are Michigan fans, and what they told me is that when Harbaugh isn't on the sideline, JJ McCarthy doesn't look as composed than as if Harbaugh was actually on that sideline. Now, JJ McCarthy, on the surface, he also similarly takes care of the ball okay. He also only has thrown 4 interceptions, but the last couple of weeks, JJ McCarthy has struggled. He has really struggled. The Penn State game, not necessarily his fault. That was a dictation of the game plan. That was the interim coach just taking the most sure path of winning, and that's just to run it like the pass was considered a trick play. Because Penn State's defensive front, they were getting home. And that's another thing, too, now that I think about it. How does Michigan's line hold up against JTT, as well as some of these other pass rushers that Ohio State has? Because they're fast, and they're physical, too. Penn State's can get home, Ohio State's can get home, too. How does Michigan handle that? Do they bring in 6-7 guys, project JJ McCarthy, and really work that play action? And then simultaneously, how does JJ McCarthy in general respond? Game plan involved him more, and again struggled. 12 for 23, 141 yards, no touchdowns to his name. Also threw an interception as well. Can you get away with that against Ohio State? Honestly, kind of doubt it. I really, truly doubt it. So, JJ McCarthy, if that running game's even if the running game does get going, I think JJ McCarthy is going to have to make some plays. I think Kyle McCord also has to make some plays as well. So who do I think is going to win this game? The model has Michigan winning, but Ohio State covering. I'm going to go a step further. I think this is a game where if Jim Harbaugh was on the sideline, if I knew that was going to be the case, I would feel different. But he's not. And in a close game like that, like the game that I think we're going to have, I think that type of stuff matters because Ryan Day should be the better coach. And because Ryan Day should be the better coach than whoever the interim coach is, I know it's the offensive coordinator. His name escapes me. His name does escape me right now. But at the end of the day, I truly believe Ryan Day would be the better coach. And because of that, I'm going a step further. Not only do I think Ohio State covers, like the model has it, I think Ohio State wins outright, and we'll be seeing them in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship against Iowa. And with that, kids, I want to go ahead and wrap up the Any Given Saturday podcast. I do want to take the chance to thank you guys for listening in. I truly enjoyed it. It was jam-packed. It has truly been jam-packed. We're really excited for what this last college football weekend has in store for us. So, and I hope you guys are too. So that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you did, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button for me. Hit that subscribe button as well. If you do have to be brand new, I'm your host, Jake. I will catch you guys sometime next week. With that being said, I'm signing off, but hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.